So, Father, we thank you for this day, opportunity that we have to be gathered together with you. Thank you for your love, your support, your understanding, and your continual provisions that you always give to us in and through different ups and downs of life and difficulties that we all face, and the challenges and opportunities to seek that which is right and to just have ourselves be in the self-control of the Spirit, to have you harness our emotions and our thoughts and subject those under the obedience of filtering those experiences and those feelings and those thoughts into, what is our response needed to be, what is our reaction that needs to be squelched, and yet our response needs to be that which comes from what you expect from us and what you demand of us. And so we thank you for being our Father and our Master and our loving Father, and continually to provide again and sustain us. Thank you for always being alongside of us and the person of the Holy Spirit to comfort us and guide us. Thank you now for being our pastor, our teacher, our guide, our shepherd, our teacher, everything in this time that we always look and turn to you and understanding of you and your word. Be with each and every one continuously through the different situations and trials of life and the ailments that are out there, from thankfulness to Lainey's recovery from her kidney situation, to Coletta's situation of moving and helping her get that, the help of her sisters to get her through that, to my situation with my mom, and the situation yesterday was as good as it could be again. And just thank you so much for all that you continue to just provide and ease the soul, to always be mindful and watchful and vigilant till your return is ever approaching. So help us to continue to take a moment so these opportunities we have to seek you and look for you, and not just in the return, but in every area of our lives that you've already been moving, and yet we may have not been seeing it. Help us to see areas where we can have restitution, reconciliation, more opportunities where we can actually do right and make right by those that have wronged us and those that we have wronged, that we have, whatever role we're to play, that you would have us to understand and be cognizant of that. Help us look inside of our hearts. So search out within us the wicked ways, reveal to us those sins as you had spoken to your child David. And so we ask now that you be again that pastor and that shepherd now in our time of study with you. May the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight. We pray all this in Jesus, Yeshua's name. Amen. All right, so today's lesson ongoing will be from the restitution reconciliation we did not finish from last week. And again, for those joining in, don't forget today is Communion Sunday. Also, I'll let you know as a side note, my mom's interment yesterday, I told you already, I was unawares that I would be the one who put my mom's ashes into the ground. Very unexpected, very weird situation, given I didn't see that coming. Didn't think that I'd be that person that would be that one, but I was. And so that was quite an ordeal. Something else happened at the funeral that was the internment, they call it, that was interesting, was that I had a brother of mine that he and I had some indifference, and interesting enough, in line with today's lesson, that fell in line with it. And so the nuts and bolts of that were that I had ignored him back in the time when I was concerned about the vitriol and some indifference of the boundaries of not wanting to be put in harm's way anymore in the crosshairs. So I ignored phone calls to him, from which I told him to call me and to expect me to return him the prior day, and then the other day I just didn't. That was over like 10 years ago. And then so I just felt like, even though it wasn't, some people might say, oh, you just ignored him. It really wasn't a sin against him. Well, the fact that I told him to call me and he can rely on me to whatever, hang out or whatnot, and I just ignored him, I still wrong, So, but I didn't want to, I couldn't broach that. So I saw him there, went right up to him and said, straight up that I was, sorry about that, and I was wrong. I first put my, fist pump out, and because you can't do the COVID thing, shake hands. And then he just says, nope. And I go, okay, well, I'll do the apology first. And he goes, that's right. And so I'm like, oh, wow, he's expecting this. So but he said it in a good way, but in his way. And it went really well. I just confessed what I just said. And he goes, why'd you do that? And I said, well, I was going through different thought processes of protecting myself against those who could bring me more harm, more anguish, more hatred, more whatevers. And I wanted nothing to do with it. I couldn't trust the situation and the people involved. So I had to put myself out there. If it was trusting in this situation, I would have done this a long time ago. But it made it difficult for me to know, where do I do that? And so God made this available today. And forget the narrative and all the different, I just want to make sure you know, here's the bottom line. I was wrong. Had nothing to do with you. Had to do with my protections of myself and dealing with the situation, and I ask you to forgive me. And he says to me, to err is human, to forgive is not my policy. And that guy, he's always been known to say that. It was kind of a chuckle, because how he said it was tongue-in-cheek. And I thought, wow, this is a good sign, you know. And then we talked more off and on about different situations, different subject matter. Then the actual service took place. Then after I put Mom's ashes of her body into the earth, which was really, that was moving. And then later on, I said, so I put my arm around him later on, and I said, hey, are we okay? And he goes, like I said, to err is human, but to forgive is not my policy. And this is my second oldest brother. He's really tough, you know. He doesn't show emotion. He thinks that's all sissy things. So he choked up, and he said, but it's Mom's funeral, so you're my brother, and I'll make the exception. And then he goes, hey, man, we got to seal the deal. And I go, what? And he puts his hand out like this. And I shook his hand. And he goes, we're all good, man. I was like, wow. It was a really good thing, you know? So it just kind of shows, it's kind of interesting that God would have that moment yesterday. And we're coincidentally talking about reconciliation and restitution, and vice versa, restitution, reconciliation. And God had me experience it, you know, firsthand about the benefits of doing these things. And so we're going to look at some things here continuously, but I wanted to put that out there to let you know not only what happened, but how it's consistent with what we all have to do, and not you know, I knew right away the first thing I had to say to him. It wasn't like I was going to wait for it to come up. I knew what I was waiting for was the right opportunity for God to present to me the safe area to where I could not be put in harm's way, and that was a safe, God orchestrated a safe opportunity for me to do that. It's unfortunate it took so long for me to be at that place. I'm not going to just own in that situation, but it feels so much better to have that. So in lieu of that, I can say that we talked about last week the issue of restitution and the specific manner from which the level in which you're accountable is the level in which you're responsible, then depicts the deviation from that where restitution has to be made. We covered that last week. So the level of your accountability, the level of your responsibility, and the level of deviation from those two things, and the involvement that you have dictates the restitution. We talked about how you have a direct accountability or direct responsibility. It changes restitution of what you have to give if there was damage or harm done. So the Exodus passages in Exodus 21 and 22 were about harm or damage being done. And how do you make right by that? So this is specifically different. We're going to cover today more is about the actual direct harm of something that has been stolen from somebody. That means you can steal their innocence. You can steal their property. You can steal, you can rob them of their, my one brother said to me, I'm reflecting back on what we didn't learn from our parents. It was an emotional conversation, but he was honest, and it was true what he said about how we didn't learn how to love. We didn't learn how to have a relationship. We didn't learn how to accept people with their faults without making fun of them or getting upset with them. We didn't learn how to forgive. We didn't learn all these things. I'm thinking, you know what? He's so on point. I'm going, I agree. It's true. So they stole from us the ability to be equipped with human basic fundamentals of love, communication, all right? So when you think of Leviticus, we're going to get into that later today, that's about, so with Exodus, restitution is about harming or damaging somebody. You harm or damage somebody and their property, the level of your responsibility and accountability is the level of your deviation of that, and your involvement in it all dictates the type of restitution you should give. So it's the level of your responsibility and accountability, the deviation from that, how far did you deviate from it, and how much was your involvement in it. All of those things lead to what is your restitution supposed to be. And so we talked about that already in quite detail, gave some illustrations about how, remembering how we look at Exodus, he's talking about an ox a lot. Because remember, ox was a similitude or a simile for us to understand its property, or an enchargement of what's responsible to you, as in parent to child. We're responsible for the children under us, whether it's our own bloodline or whether you're in a child care facility, for example, or whether you're a caregiver for an elderly parent. Anybody you're responsible for, that would fall in line with where your liabilities are in Exodus 21 and 22. If you're responsible for things or people, Exodus 21 and 22 says, Know it well. We talked about that. So something that you do or you cause harm, again, you have to make sure you know how to pay the proper restitution. And it resonates with people's souls. It just resonates with them and brings them healing and brings them confidence to know that God's a just God. And God has you have a contrite heart. Again, to the level of your responsibility and accountability, to the level of your deviation, to the level of your involvement. And all of a sudden you do these things that God exemplifies in detail about the old school ways of ox and cattle and fields, but that's extrapolated into principles we talked about, how to live that out, right? So now the basic principles I want to start before we get into Leviticus. So we're going to look at Leviticus in chapter 6. We're going to start there today. Before we start in Leviticus chapter 6, I want to also start with this concept, and I'm standing in front of the board, don't worry about it for now. But the thing is, there's a process, we got to get this in our heads, okay? So restitution, reconciliation, I talked before we get involved in that, we have to understand first, our first mindset is to go toward those who have wronged us. Remember, we can't do that. We got to be as the victim mentality. If you're a victim, then you have to make sure you take on David's concept of you got to show respect to God's will over you as the authority, him and Saul. You got to give mercy and forgive. And you have to do that overwhelmingly with a sense of understanding that that's your role. Don't look at this restitution, reconciliation message as they owe me. No, no one owes you anything. You owe everyone a debt of love. I do and you do. So they have a responsibility to do something right. That's correct. But they don't owe it to you. They owe you love. They should do restitution. They owe it to God. Now, when it comes to stealing, though, it's a lot different. He's going to talk about that. They do. Now he's talking about owing to God and to man. That's a different level. He's going to talk about this in Leviticus. He raises the ante on restitution, reconciliation from doing harm and damage, which is a lot less issue than stealing from somebody. Robbing somebody of something is a whole different level of restitution, reconciliation. Understand the difference, okay? So we're going to get there. But in order to get there, the premise from, again, restitution, reconciliation on harming and damaging I talked about is being one who's merciful, being one who's respectful of God's ordained will over your life. We talked about that from 2 Samuel, Proverbs, doing what's right even though you weren't the one who wronged anybody. You have to do all that stuff. But now I want to start with another concept of a precept here is that forgiveness, love, and trust are three separate things. And I've mentioned this on multiple times to different people already over the last week. But let me kind of walk you through what this is about. So forgiving somebody is on your side of the fence. They can be an obstinate, sinful, stiff-necked, hard-hearted evildoer. It doesn't matter who they are. Your job is to forgive them. You go, where do you get that from? Whoa. On the cross, Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It's the first thing he said. Not because of what they were doing, because of what they were doing, and they were continuing to do it, and intensify it, and continually have no acknowledgement of it, could care less. He says, yeah, I know, but I forgive you. That's hard to even imagine. So forgiveness is on our side of the ledger. You cannot use someone else's actions, someone else's mindset, someone else's inability, someone else's... Stop it. Well, you don't understand how evil they are. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when it comes to forgiveness. It matters when it comes to the consequence. It matters when it comes to the mercy you have to show, how hard it is to do that. That all matters. It matters how difficult it may be to forgive. It matters in that way. But it doesn't change the fact that the same rules apply. You got to forgive. It's on your side of the fence. They're under no obligation to change themselves for you to all of a sudden be off the hook of forgiving them because they're still living like a bunch of dillweeds. It doesn't change. You still got to do what you got to do. Jesus showed us that. Get that through our heads, right? So that's the first thing. Okay? And then, that's the first thing. Then the next step after forgiveness is remembering it's on your side of the fence. It has nothing to do with the other person. It has to do with you, within your heart, your mind, your spirit, releasing. That's what it means. It means to let loose. You release the burdens that they laid on you. You release the emotional, mental, spiritual, physical scars of associating it to them, and you forgive them as the vessel that abused their role over you, and you acknowledge God. At our level, we're supposed to do forgiveness in this. This is us now. No, most people don't understand this part. But for us, as being supposed to be called mature ones, you better take that next level and then say, okay, once I've done that, I've separated the fact that I've loosed them from being the one who I blame for my feelings, for my thoughts, for my scars. And I'm now turning over to God, and I'm seeing, okay, Lord, why did you orchestrate these things in my life? What was your intent as my Father who loves me? That's what we're supposed to do when you forgive. Not all people in Christ understand this, but mature ones are supposed to. Hebrews 12 talked about it, about pursuing peace aggressively. Aggressively. That's the words he uses. Aggressively pursue peace. That sounds pretty interesting. Goes with that comment I made before about how you have to fight for your peace. Yeah, he's telling you it's a very big deal, man. Even more so for those, the more you know, the more you should be doing these things at a different level, right? In practical reality. So the next step is, after you forgive, okay, say you get to that. That's hard enough as it is, right? If Jesus is forgiving them as they're still doing the wrong. Oh my goodness gracious. And they're intensifying it. And he's like, I forgive you. Oh my God. So that's hard enough to do that. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's easy, because it's not. But you've got to do it. It's for your side of the fence. They can still not change their behaviors and still not change their attitudes and their actions. That's why Jesus said 70 times 7. Meaning they aren't the issue. It's you. It's me. It's us that are the issue. We got to forgive. They can still live all they want in total evil and just vileness. That's not the point. The point is, can we come to a place where we can forgive and be in a state of constant, ongoing forgiveness? Not past tense, a constant state of it. That is, oh God. You know how hard that is? Right? But you gotta do it. And if you struggle with it because you have deeper pains, I understand, you gotta always ask God to give you the strength and the understanding and the peace from Him. Let Him do that for you. How do you do that? Well, you spend more time in prayer, more time in study, more time in praise. Sing songs of thanksgiving to Him. Look at His Word and meditate on the words that you read from those pages. Spend time just in prayer talking to Him. You don't talk to Him, listen to Him, and then sing to Him. That's how you can help yourself be at a better mentality, right? Then the second, after you get the forgiveness done, you check that box. This is that preface before we get into Leviticus, by the way. So the preface is, understand what forgiveness means. Secondly, love. What did Jesus do with love? He said, love is, he that has my commandments and keeps them is he that loves me. So how can you give somebody love? Yikes. You have to be the one who keeps his commandments. They can still be, again, the evil, vile person. You got to extend love to them because it's on you, it's becoming upon you to exhibit, which is the result of keeping the commandments. In other words, wanting to pursue your walk with God righteously is evidenced by the fact that you're loving those who have wronged you. Oh my gosh. You know, yes.
Lainey said, just ready to ask that question. If you are close to the situation and it continues, should you remove yourself from that situation?
Well, that's what I did earlier in my confession that I did with my brother. Not my brother in spirit, well, that too, but my brother in physical flesh, DNA code. I actually removed myself from the situation, but it didn't change the fact that he still felt like I had to make right by him. Because in my example, I had wronged him in a sense of ignoring him, right? So if someone's wronged you, right, that's different, right? So if you want to remove yourself from the situation, that's like I did it for the reasons of being safe from the vileness of different indifferences of, I didn't want any more malicious things coming my way. I was just done with it. Doesn't matter why. I should have, you know, I was making a boundary, so it's kind of like, you know, I get it. But in your case, if someone is wrong, if your question is about if you're the one being wronged, is it okay to remove yourself? Absolutely, you know. God does not want you to put yourself out there. God wants you to be as shrewd as a serpent, but as gentle as a dove. So you have to have the wisdom and the prudence to not put yourself in harm's way. You don't put yourself in harm's way. You seek peace and pursue it, God says. So you know, how can you seek peace? By constantly putting yourself out in a situation where it's now there's a fine line here between putting yourself out there to be hurt with the opportunity to be reconciled in love versus putting yourself out there to be hurt when there's a known issue that could cause harm legitimately. Don't be foolish. Like, in other words, you don't go to a serial killer. Oh, I found out where he's at when he killed my parents. I'm going to go to find him now. Oh, I found out where he's at. He's behind the alleyway. And I'm not going to go to him. Are you out of your mind? He's a serial killer. You know, but if all of a sudden, you know, there's a change in behavior from him, If there's some indication of God's movement in my heart in my spirit to know that something is a safe situation, which is highly unlikely, but if that does happen, you know, but you got to, there's rational understanding of this, right? You don't put yourself in harm's way is the point. You don't do that. You don't do that. God never says, put yourself in harm's way. That's why Jesus said to Satan, do not test the Lord your God. So folks who say, God will protect me, hallelujah. He'll protect Jesus too. That's what Satan tried to use against him. Did he jump off of the cliff like he told him to, off the precipice? Angels will catch you? No, because you don't exploit the things that God promises you as if to think that therefore God's promises are carte blanche, which means you have no responsibility to live in the way he intended. So when he says don't test, he means don't live ignorantly of what he told you to do as if to go, you got me, right? Well, of course God's going to love and protect you. Of course he is. Does that mean you walk in the middle of an interstate when it's rush hour? Really? You do that? That mean you put your hand in rattlesnake dens? Really? Do you do that? You just jump off two-story, but you just drink all the poison in the world. God's gonna not let me die. There's all these arsenic, and you don't do that. That's insane, right? You don't just take Russian roulette and go, I'm not gonna die. God's gonna protect me. You don't. That's dumb, right? You don't put yourself in harm's way. Simple. You don't do that. So remember, it can't be imagined. It has to be real. If there's a real harm, remember, fear is inside. Fear is here. Danger is real. If there's a real danger, if there's a real harm, not imagined, but real, you got to have the precautions made that are totally legit to protect yourself. But if it's all in your head and there's no harm, there's no legitimate harm, it's all up here or in your heart that you're feeling that way, that's different. So I'm not here to psychoanalyze. I'm just saying that the truth of it, right? You got to make sure to delineate between what is real and what is imagined. What is a known concern? What is a maybe concern? There's differences here. We got to use prudence and common sense. Yes.
Okay. First of all, Lainey said, "Okay, I get the principle. Flee, but do it without hate and revenge, but peacefully."
That's correct.
Pam said that would fall into the wise as a serpent part. Don't be dumb. And Lainey said it isn't life-threatening, but interferes with spiritual peacefulness. Yeah,
and that's why. There's where again there's uniqueness there. That's why no person can judge another, right? Someone might say you should be doing this. I would have done that. I don't know what's going on your individual heart, mind, soul, and spirit, because that's unique to what that human or those humans or that situation did to you. Only you, God, and the people involved know the exact nature of what's going on. What I do know, what I'm supposed to do as brothers and sisters together, is to encourage one another to think about the principles and then let God's Spirit convict you and move you to act accordingly. But to do no action is inexcusable. I'll tell you that right now. That's always wrong. You got to do something. Whether it's internal or external, there's always something you have to do. Always. There's never a time you can go, oh, well, because you're wrong because you just told me you can't say anything. Well, about what exactly to do? No, I can't give you this exact, follow these rules because I'm your God. I'm not your God. I'm just a human being. I'm a sinner. God, though, makes principles very clear. An action has to take place. And at the very minimum, inside your own heart and soul and spirit, you got to have a change. You cannot say, you don't know. You just said you don't know, so how do you know? Because Jesus made it clear that we are to forgive. It is our job, as a requirement. We're going to look later on about in Scripture where he talks about not only forgiving, but reconciling. It's like a big deal. He even charges us with that responsibility. So we're going to look at that a little bit later. You can't reconcile. There's no way in Hades you're going to be able to do that if you can't forgive. There's no way. It's like impossible. So you can't even do that. Anyway, so with that being said, there's the forgiveness step first, then there's the love step, but you can't love unless, again, I mentioned how you have to take time to have God's commandments. That means you have to spend time as a child of God to become more of a student of God, to then live as a beloved of God. Think about that. So if you want to, you say, I'm a child of God and I love, based on what? Your feelings? No. What did Jesus say in John 14:21? He has my commandments and keeps them is he that loves me. Well, wait a second. Jesus put a prerequisite out there. He didn't say, he who believes in me loves me. He who sings praises and worship songs in their assembly loves me. He didn't say that. He didn't say that. He who gives thankfulness and gratefulness to me and praise and worship loves me. That's not what he said. He could have, but he didn't. He made it very clear. He spells love O-B-E-Y. And Nana used to sing a song like that to Ryan. O-B-E-Y, obey your mom and dad. O-B-E-Y, makes your God very happy, very glad. Listen to the words they say. Obey your parents every day. O-B-E-Y, obey your mom and dad. I don't know if you've heard that before, but I don't know if she made that up or what. I don't know. I've never heard it before until we had grandkids. But it just reminds me of, it's true. That's how God wants us to show love. He said, we feel love. I think about loving them. God's like, okay, do you know what I said to do? Are you doing it? Then you're not loving that person. Well, you don't understand, Lord. I don't understand. Are you insane? He's the creator. He understands everything. You don't, God, but they hurt me really badly. Like, I don't know this. Like, I'm not shocked by this. And God's not going, oh, you know what? You're right. I forgot about that. Of course God knows. He knows every level of the mental, emotional scars, physical, spiritual scars that have been put on us. He knows it all. And still says, child, forgive. Oh, gosh. And he goes, okay, you go, okay, Lord, I got there. Now what? He goes, now show them love. How am I going to do that? He said, well, that's not about what they do, right? It's about what you do, remember? You show love by following me. And then out of you will flow whatever I let you do to extend to them love, which is what he means by saying fiery coals upon their head. Meaning you're doing loving actions that they're going, why are you doing that when I have this vitriol towards you? When I have this hatred towards you? When I have no acknowledgement of my sins against you? When I continue to keep doing it against you? Why are you being kind to me? Why are you showing me love? Where is this coming from? That's heaping coals of fire on their head. That's what Jesus is talking about, because they have no idea where this is coming from. I remember another story. I'll tell you a true story. A guy, he accused me of something that wasn't true. Someone walked in to the office. It was years ago. It was a client of his. I didn't know that. This person walks in, asks for just any Tom, Dick, or Harry, Susie Q. I came up, tried helping him out, and we started having some laughter, and we were jesting. He walks by, sees that person. And he just, then later on, he gives me the evil eye, like a stink eye. And I'm like, what's up with that? Then he goes, that's mine. Oh, I'm like, whoa, time out. I didn't know. Okay, fine. I didn't know. I don't know, we're just talking. Nothing happened. We never met in a quiet space. We're out in the front space just laughing and gesturing. I was just taking a paper to file for him. That's all. Relax. Trying to steal my business. I'm not doing anything. I'm just, oh, I thought I could trust you, Christian. And he just walked away, like all mad. I'm like, dude, what is that about? I didn't do anything. So you know what I did? I said, Lord, I don't understand. And this guy, man, he is a type A personality. Like, he's all about it. So I'm like, dude, he just went off on me. And everybody in the office, he started spreading rumors about how bad I was. So I'm like, okay, that's not cool. So I was like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I remember the scripture about heaping fire of coals on their head, about showing love where someone is not even wanting to receive that love or even be in a place to be loving toward me is irrelevant. I have to show love. And I can't do that until I forgive first. So I forgave, and then I was at the store, and he liked to play golf. And I remember, I'm telling you the story for a reason, because I saw also, think about this big, it's a little golf club with a sawed off part of the golf piece of it, just shank, and it has a little engraving on there, and it said, and golf, it's like in life. It's not your swing that you take at it. It's your follow through that counts, something like that. And it had a golf ball and all. It's a little thing on his desk, you know. So okay, that's cool. And I brought it to the office, and he was there early in the morning. I got there early, so I knew he'd be there. I just walked by, didn't say a word, just said, I just want you to have that. And he goes, what's that? I go, just a gesture, something I want you to have. Lord wanted me to give that to you. Have a great day. And I went away. And then he opens it up. Later on, he goes, that was nice of you, man. I don't understand why. I said, just thought you'd like it. Well, we're now, fast forward, we're now 7 years later. No, maybe 8, 9 years later. I've seen him 4 times in the last, like once a year I see him in his office, which is not anymore near me anymore. He's in a separate place. He has that in his office, right in clear view. Every time I see him, he brings it up. I don't say anything. I don't bring it up at all. He always goes, look, man, remember that? You're going to tell me it doesn't mean something to him? Of course it does. Every time he sees me, he brings it up. It's in his office, right behind him. I mean, it's unbelievable. When he walks in, first thing he sees, it's right there. When he sits down, then he turns around, and it's still right there behind him. When he swivels his chair toward his monitor, it's right there. I mean, how could you not? I'm thinking to myself, Lord, how much more does God have to continue to show us? Those little things like that he shows you by following the rules, what God tells you to do. You'd be amazed what will happen. But you go, it's tough to do that. If it was easy, we'd all be doing it, right? That's the old adage, right? If it was easy to live a righteous life in a sinful body in a sinful world, we'd all be doing it without any problems. The reason we have a Bible, an instruction book, is because we don't do right? We need help. God's got to guide us through this. So we got to apply those principles. And so I just did that, and I was benefited by it. That's just one example. Now, we all have examples like that we can go to, but they're harder to do, like I said before, when the grievance is deeper. The deeper the cut, the harder it is to heal, right? And that lies into, again, so step 1, forgiveness. Step 2 is love. We talked about that. Step 3 is then to have that sense of trust. How can I extend trust to this person ever again? If just because I forgave them, which is step 1, then I show them love, that's step 2, which are two separate things. They are not automatic. They are not automatic. They are not automatic. They happen separate from each other. There could be a space in time between A and B. That is totally fine. Just understand that they're not automatic. I just can't stand it when people in Christianity and churchianity make it sound like they're the same. They're not the same. They are different. You can forgive. It's going to take time to show an extension of love, because maybe the deeper the cut, the harder it is to try to seek God's help and say, okay, God, it took me every ounce of courage I had to forgive. How do I show them love? How do I do that? How do you do that? Sometimes it's not as easy as you think. What if the true story? What if a true story? What if a true story of two parents who had one child and they molested her, and then when she reported it, they threatened to murder her, then she escapes? How's she going to show restitution to these parents who said straight up, we're going to kill you? True story. I'm not going to say who it is. Not my family. Not my family. Somebody else. They're going to kill her because she's going to expose them for being sexually, deviant parents. How could she possibly go back to these parents and show them love directly? She can't. She can't risk her life. That's insane. So she has to somehow find a way to do that. So the deeper the scar, the harder it is. Forgiveness, that's hard enough as it is. But then in that situation, how much harder is it to love? So you can't just say to somebody, no, relax, relax. That's because you had a slight scratch. I forgave and loved. Well, because you had a scratch. This person had major surgery. Would you just chill out? The spiritual effect of one to another is different. But the person who's scarred deeply, same holds true. They can't say, well, you don't understand. I have a right to be. No, 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 no. Doesn't matter how deeply you're scarred. We all have to forgive. We all have to love that person who wronged us. You have no choice. Now, the process may be more exasperating, more emotionally, mentally, spiritually draining. I'll give you that. But the accountability and the responsibility does not change. You're not off the hook. It just means that we're more sensitized and more understanding and more compassionate to those who have been hurt more deeply. That's all. Doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're exempt from the rules. And the rules still apply to you and me. I'm talking from my space of understanding. I already talked about that. So after you forgive, after you love, then you have to say the trust factor. How do you do trust? Well, the person who's wronged you, has to do 3 things. They have to acknowledge they're wrong. They have to change their conduct. And have to pay restitution. We're talking about that right now. And we're going to see this today in the story of Zacchaeus later on. But that's what has to happen. It has to happen that way. So in order to show somebody forgiveness, that's on your side of the fence. In order to show them love, that's on your side of the fence. They could be, again, evil incarnate and vile. It doesn't change the fact that you have accountability to forgive and love. 2 separate actions, 2 separate functions. But then you have to say, as the victim, how do I trust them again? Now that may never happen. Why? Because that's not on your side of the fence alone. That requires collaboration. the person who wronged you owns the responsibility to earn back your trust. You're under zero responsibility to trust that person again. You have zero responsibility. I'll make that clear. If someone has wronged you, and they have scarred you, and they have wounded you, forgive them, you must. Love them, you must. Trust them again, not required. Not required. You go, that's not biblical. It's not required. There's no biblical basis for it at all. They own that responsibility to earn back your trust. And they have to do it by acknowledgement, change behavior, restitution. And that this is speaking about in Exodus 21 and 22. And now we're going to go into Leviticus 6. I want to make that clear before we start to read Leviticus 6 so we understand as victims, or the ones who have done the wrong, where our roles and responsibilities lie. Yes?
Pam said, that's right, we're only required to trust the Lord.
That's right, you trust the Lord. It'd be foolish to put yourself in harm's way to someone who's not worthy of trusting when they've already shown you a pattern. Remember the scripture we read about in Exodus 22? God says, I will examine each man. If you're responsible, he said, if you incited the behavior of the person who caused the damage and harm to the possession you were given stewardship over, then you're responsible. But if you didn't, the Lord says, I'm going to examine and know the truth here. The Lord, trust me. He goes, you can lie all you want in posture, but to God you can't lie in posture. There's no narratives. He knows the truth, the unadulterated, naked truth. So he says, look, I know what went on. I know exactly your involvement. You said a word, you did a deed. And that's why that person went to go spray paint your house, and they were caught, they fell, your daughter came out, they saw him, they didn't know who it was, they shot, and now she's wounded. Your fault. Because you called them names and you did something before that incited that behavior, and that's why your daughter's in harm's way. Look at yourself in the mirror. Don't blame your neighbor. It's your fault. He's wrong and you're both wrong. You're equally both wrong. Both of you are wrong. Not one. You're both, God says, equally accountable. Not weighted, equally. Because the responsible party over what they're stewards over, if they incite the behavior that caused the harm, the one who did the harm and the one who incited it are equally responsible. Wow. So we already saw that in Exodus, right? So it goes back to the trust issue of if someone has not acknowledged what they did was wrong, if they have not changed their conduct, and if they have not paid restitution, then you're not under zero obligation to trust them. Oh, by the way, watch this now. Let me twist it on you here. What do you think God thinks about that, about us? Why would God trust us with more of who he is and what his word says, or more blessings, if we haven't acknowledged where we have sinned, if we don't change our conduct, if we don't pay him back restitution? Think about it. Think. This is why this is important. It's about having more trust from God. He wants to entrust us with things, right? He says, if you're faithful in a little, I'll give you over much. Why would he do that if we haven't acknowledged our sins, we haven't changed our conduct, and we haven't paid restitution? He's given us the keys, not just for interpersonal relationships of humankind, but to our Creator. This is all a training course. It's a training course. We're in the basic training of art. This is one big platoon. This is one big training exercise to get us to understand forgiveness and love and trust, as in toward God himself. Sometimes you have it. Just be honest now. Do you ever have that place of vitriol or sometimes anger and frustration toward God? Why did you do this to me? You're like, don't say, I never have. Job certainly did. And he was the best of us. Just saying. Job certainly did. He blamed God. He was the best of us, and he had moments when it got real bad, when the heat was turned up off the chart, and trauma and devastation and collateral damage went his way. Boy, he snapped. So if you had ugly things happen to you, don't lie to yourself. You know the truth. There's moments, I testify, I'll start, I'll confess, I did get mad at God. Like, why would you ever do this to me? Why would you make me, what put these parents in my life? Like, why? Like, why? Why put me in this violence? I don't understand. Can you get to the point where you can accept God? Can you forgive God, if you will? Not that he needs to be forgiven, but can you get to that place in your heart where you can change how you view him? Instead of being upset with him, being indifferent to him. Can you have peace with him? Can you show him love when you in your mind feel like there's nothing but blame and accusatory stuff, and it's just not good. You gotta just accept, have peace. So anyway, a lot being said, let's go to Leviticus chapter 6. Leviticus chapter 6. It says in verse 1, moreover, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, with regard to the person who shall sin, and who utterly disregarding the commands of the Lord, this is Leviticus 6, verse 1, utterly disregarding the commands of the Lord, shall lie to his neighbor, touching a deposit, or touching anything which he might use in common, or touching anything made a prey of, whether he has defrauded his neighbor in any respect, or he's found what was lost, he shall lie concerning it, or swear falsely in respect to any other things which he has done, so as thereby to commit sin. You understand? He's basically covering all bases. He's saying, okay, you can be your lawyer all you want and lawyer up, but he's saying, bottom line, I don't care whether you do it by force, deception, lie, fraud, neglect, you lose, you steal what was lost, something's lost, you go, well, someone has to rent a car and they drop it off, and they leave their wallet in the back seat. You go, it's my wallet now. You know doggone well it's that person right there just left. Come on, man. Well, it was lost. Was it though? Was it though? It was forgotten. Would you just stop with your narrative or your justification of your sins? That's what God's saying. I don't care how you want to frame it. I didn't steal. Yeah, you did. You know you stole. You know it. We all do that kind of stuff. The guy or the gal at the counter, she's paying for her cosmetics and she breaks up her wallet and a $100 bill drops out. And you go, oh, since she didn't know it, you just go up there, la, 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 pick it up. You don't give it back to her. That's mine now. It's money. It's money. You know, come on, man. That's stealing. You knew whose it was. You know it's not yours. What are you doing? Come on. So he says, I don't care how you want to get to this place of justifying how you stole something. He says, I don't care if you did it directly, by force, with deception, with innuendos. He's basically telling you stealing is stealing is stealing. You can try to justify it all you want. You're a thief, you're a thief, you're a thief. Well, I didn't mean to steal her innocence, Your Honor. I was just what? There's no excuse for an adult to take a young girl and take her innocence away. I don't want to hear it. There's no excuse. Zero. Zero. There's no excuse. No excuse. I don't want to hear it. It's done. There's no excuse. So you can't justify taking her innocence away. You can't give that back. How about taking away from a child their ability to know their self-value and love from God because you abuse them, because you mistreat them? So take the stealing thing, not just from a physical standpoint, but from a spiritual standpoint, from a mental, emotional standpoint, things you just can't. How do you give back to that person? Verse 4, Leviticus 6. When he who has sinned and transgressed has restored the thing wrongfully taken, or that which he has gotten unjustly, or the deposit which he committed to his trust, or the thing lost which he has found, then for everything about which he has sworn falsely, he will pay a fine to the same amount. In other words, like for like. Like for like, he pays back plus a fine, and he'll add a fifth, which means 20%. Yes?
And he said, I had that experience with a guy at the bank. He dropped a $50 bill and was hurrying out the door. Nobody saw it, and I chased him down and gave it to him.
There you go. And that person testifies to that sense that that's a good, a good gesture, right? They know that. But I want you to also understand this. You say, oh, so I get it. These are rules of living. If we do these things, and everything's right as rain. Not exactly. Genesis 33. There's a story of Esau and Jacob. You can read the story from Genesis chapter 33, verses 1 to 11. And the story goes something like this. Jacob just wrestled with God in the previous chapter. Had his name changed. God says, a new folk going to come from you. You're no longer Jacob, you're Israel. Wrestled with God. Name was changed. He was blessed beyond measure. That to this day, we still talk about it. Next chapter opens up. Well, that must mean that he is so forgiving and so loving that he'll be the one who leads the way with, no, it was Esau who ran to him and hugged on him and kissed his cheek. And he was desiring restitution, reconciliation with his brother. As the story unfolds, Jacob wants to give to Esau. Restitution. Why? Because he took his birthright. He took it. He stole it. He lied. He deceived him. Deceived his father. Lied to his brother. Defrauded him. He wanted to pay him back out of how God blessed him bountifully, he said. And Jacob called Esau a man that when he saw him, he saw the face of God. This is a man that everybody keeps on saying, oh, God hated him because Romans 9 says that he hated him, so Esau's in hell. How is he in hell again when Jacob can say, and Genesis 33, verses 9 to 11, the encounter, and he says, when I've seen your face, I've seen the face of God. And he just got finished having that exact conversation with God a chapter earlier, saying he had seen the face of God. So he wasn't coming out some Yahoo, experience. He's talking about a literal experience where he actually saw the face of God in a symbolic way. And he's talking about how Esau typifies what he just experienced. It isn't like he's a novice to that statement. He's been seasoned with understanding what that's about. He wouldn't just use that statement loosely. But Esau is condemned to hell all of a sudden? No. No. The point being is this. The restitution, reconciliation was beautiful. It was awesome. Always brings a tear when you think about it. Read the story. Because Esau told him, when I see you again, after daddy dies, I'm going to kill you. It's not what happened. Kind of like what I experienced the other day with my brother. But something else happened. I want to make sure we're clear about this. Not to get Debbie Downer here. I'll put a damper on this. But people have this misconception that I want to make sure we're clear about this. These are things we have to do. Make sure I'm clear about this. It does not mean that if you do these things, you're exempt from any harm, and all of a sudden the blessings of heaven will all flow upon you and no harm will ever come to you or those you love. That's not what it says. There's no such promise as that. But people think it. Why do I bring that up? What happened after Jacob and Esau met? To the one that Jacob loved the most. You know, Rachel, what happened to her? She gave birth to his second son from her, and she died. She died. Jacob lost the one he loved the most in this entire planet. Dead. After restitution, reconciliation was done the right way, in a heartfelt way. It was still true. It didn't change other things that happened to those that he loved. Understand that. Just because you pay restitution, reconciliation, just because you do it the right way, just because everything is done right, does not mean that you are exempt from any harm that could come to you and your loved ones. What you're doing is not to protect your loved ones. You're not doing this to say, oh, because I've done this, that means that all good will come to me now, that my loved ones will never get harmed. That's not true. You don't do it for those reasons. And stop thinking that. Do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it because God told you to do it. Do it because it's good for your soul, your spirit, to live in the way God wants you to live, to please your Father in heaven. And whatever happens, happens afterwards. You think Jacob knew Rachel was going to die after that encounter? Everything would have pointed to, my life is charmed. I just wrestled with God, got a new name, I'm blessed. My brother and I were good to go. Next thing you know, Leah's having these kids, his handmaid's having kids, but the love of his life, the light of his eye, gone. Devastating to him. Do you imagine what he must have been feeling? Why even give restitution? Why even have peace? Why? The one I love, he's gone. Why? And God would have a still voice and say, what you and I encountered and what you and your brother encountered had nothing to do with these other things. They're separate events. Well, you were actually subconsciously, Jacob, thinking that these things tied together? That you can actually change my will for your life in some way? No. It's about experiencing me in the right way along the way. And don't worry about what happens. I control that. Your job is to trust in me and not try to change the narrative because of your obedience. Yes, sorry, back here first. Yes.
Vicki asked, remind me, how did Esau get to the place where he wanted to be loving to Jacob?
It's a great question. We don't know the exact answer to that. I always joke about it and call it in the white space. He had some conversations with God, obviously, over those 20 years where Jacob was with Laban. Remember, because he worked for 7 years for Rachel, got Leah. Then worked 7 more years, so a total of 14 before he got his love, Rachel. Then 6 more years for the cattle. And that 20 years he was away, God, which is interesting because 40 is your time of trial and tribulation, and 20 is your ordained number times 2 witness and testimony. God ordained a witness and testimony against Esau that in some way and somehow, we don't know the details, but he had some peace with God somehow. There's no other way to explain how Jacob can say to him his face was filled with love. The face of God. The face of God is filled with love and peace. How did Esau have that? On his own? Impossible. No sinner on their own can have that intimation out of their face. Impossible. Impossible. God had to be involved. God showed that with Jacob. God showed it with Moses. You cannot, on your own, find it to your point. So we don't know what happened. We just know that in some way what had to happen by the evidence we see later is that unspoken was a time where God must have shown love and given peace to Esau. We don't know how and where and when. We just know it was. The evidence of that was in Jacob's encounter, and also evidenced in Deuteronomy chapter 2 when he tells the children of Israel not to go to Mount Seir. Those are descendants of Esau. We also know that because later on we find out that Job and his descendants had some relations with the line of Esau as well. So we know that he has a tie-in to blessings from one of the greatest men God called on this world, and Job as a sinner. And he also know that through God's blessing he gave to Mount Seir, to his people. So we know that those two ancillary things, but the primary reason we see he must have had an encounter with God, that he had a compassion and love and peace given to him, because Jacob's comment. And Jacob is no novice to own what the face of God looks like, because if you go back, by the way, I'll show you in this, since we're on this subject matter, in Genesis 32, in Genesis chapter 32, you'll see in Genesis chapter 32 and verse 30, and Jacob called the name of the place Face of God, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Genesis chapter 32, verses 30 and 31. And he limped with his thigh. Next chapter over, verse 4, Esau, chapter 33 of Genesis, Esau runs to him, embraces him, falls on his neck, and kisses him. Verse 10, Jacob replies of Genesis 33, I have found favor in your sight, to Esau. Receive these presents at my hands, because I've seen your face as one would see the face of God. Right. He didn't just say that out of nowhere. He just experienced it. Understand that. He's just emotionally being over the top to his brother. He just experienced the very thing he just said about his brother. Are you kidding me? To Sister Vicky's point, something happened, which is evidence again how God does not record everything for us. He wants us to take the information we've been given and understand. He doesn't have to tell you for you to know something happened. And that was a good thing in this case, that he intervened in Esau's life, which speaks to, why does God do that? Because there's always times in our people's lives that have hurt us, people that have harmed us. We don't know what's happening in their lives. We don't know how God's moving in their life. Think about those that wronged you, and you still hold to this grudge, and you hold to this thing. You don't know how God's moving in their lives. You don't know. But know how you know? Notice how Esau came to Jacob. Jacob didn't seek out Esau. Esau came to Jacob. The violent one, the one who could cause harm, is the one who came forward knowing that in order to be the one who made peace with this situation, even though he was the one that was wronged, he knew in order to make peace with it, he had to be the one who led the way, because his brother was pretty much the mama's boy and he was the man's man. He knew that his brother, he heard the words, Daddy's dead, I'll kill you, plus he's the strong one. You can really take me out. So he knew, being the violent, obstinate one, he had to show that God had changed him. So Esau sought him out. Esau sought him out, knowing, even though he was the one who was the victim, he had to seek him out because he was the one who was the violent one. He had to make sure that he knew, this is safe. This is safe for us to engage each other. I got to make sure I lead with that foot, because you don't know what God's done in my life. It's up to me to let you know that. And Esau let him know that. And then Jacob saw it instantly. It wasn't fake. It wasn't posturing. It wasn't a narrative. It was genuine. It was real. And how he knew that was because of how his body language, his facial expression, his emotions, his mental state of mind. Everything about that situation is beautiful. Yes?
And I wonder if this is something that was necessary to happen for the future preservation of 144,000 in Petra, which was Esau's territory.
It's a good point. Yeah, this is predicated on the fact later on we know about the 144,000 in Petra, which is Edom, which is Esau's land, which is a great point. That God prefaced this as if to say Petra was a quintessential after effect of what he coined earlier as two brothers restitution reconciling to each other, which would be the earmark of what happens to these remnant with Christ himself. They're going to have restitution they're going to pay by having all this collateral damage, and they're going to be reconciled to God. It's an amazing thing. It's so true. And by the way, just think about that. The one who's causing the violence, Esau, the one who caused Armageddon, God Almighty, is the one coming to them, saying, I know you're probably scared out of your mind right now, what you just saw, but it's okay. And they're going to like, wow. They're going to be like, talk about just a good point you're making. That moment that they had there would be in similitude of the emotion of what God will have as Messiah with those 144. Great point. That's why I love that. Yes?
Lady said, do you know at what age Jacob and Esau separated?
It's been a while. I don't know offhand, but I believe it was in their 20s, I believe. This is a good, they're in their 40s at this point, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going by rough memory, but I think it's 20s to 40s. There's 20 years, definitely, in between. So I believe it was in their early 20s, and now they're later on. I believe so. I can't remember exactly. But going back to Leviticus again in chapter 6. Go back to Leviticus again in chapter 6. I want to make sure I don't want to get too much convoluted, but I want to tie in stories that make reverence to God and relevance to the stories he's talking about in this restitution. So think also back to Leviticus chapter 6 and verse 6, verse 5, excuse me, the last part of verse 5. To him whose it is, he shall make, watch this now, he shall make restoration on the day he is convicted. You see? So the day you know you're wrong, the day God convicts you, Leviticus 6, verse 5, is the day you make it right. You don't wait till tomorrow. You don't wait till next week. When God opens the door, you walk through it. God gives you an opportunity, you take advantage of it immediately. So some folks go, no, that's no big deal. There'll be another opportunity. Yeah, there may be, but you know what? You got to acknowledge what you just did was wrong. If you missed a chance to make peace with somebody, to give back what you stole from them, boy, that's a bad idea. You want to be at the right place at the right time with God? Always be attentive, to be vigilant and watchful, not just for his return, but for his movement in your life to how you can make restitution, reconciliation, how you can give back that which you stole. God makes opportunities for that. He doesn't mean just be watchful and vigilant for him to return. He means be watchful and vigilant for ways you can be showing forgiveness, showing love, showing how you can build trust back, showing how you can be restitution, reconciliation. Look, be watchful and vigilant for ways in which you can be obedient, to be loving, to be pleasing to your Father in heaven. Yes?
Vicky said, so if someone whom has harmed you is trying to make amends with you, you now have the responsibility to accept their gesture and forgive them.
You
or
have
do
to.
they need to see those three things that lead you to trust first?
That's right. What you just said is correct. So if someone's harmed you, wants to make right, you have to open up you have to open up to that. You have no choice. You don't understand they've wronged me 6 times from Sunday, and they keep doing it this last week alone, let alone 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I got it. I lost everything because of them. I understand. They took this, they took that. If they're reaching out to you, you have to be open to receive. But the vetting process, to be prudent, they could be conniving, they could be lying, they could be posturing. But you can't think that way. But you can be prudent and be wise and say, wait a minute, have they acknowledged what they've done was wrong? Has their behavior changed? And are they coming with restitution? So the first two, they can fake, can't they? You can fake. You can fake all day long, acknowledging. You just say words and not mean it. You can also fake, changing your behavior by just making it look like something it's not. You can't fake restitution. That's why it's important. Because restitution requires recognition and sacrifice. It requires recognition and sacrifice. And we're going to look at Zacchaeus in a second here because of what you just brought up. So huge of a point. Yes?
And Vicky said we must do this 70 times 7. Right?
That's right. 7. There's no end to it. There's no end. There's no. You can't say I've done that. 70 times 7. She was saying we have to do this.
Sacrifice and what else?
I'm sorry. Sacrifice and recognition. You have to recognize. In order to give restitution, you have to recognize the depth of which you've hurt somebody. Then you have to make the sacrifice to make it right. Restitution requires recognition. You just can't say, I know I got restitution, but do you know why? Yes, I hurt you. No. You scarred me deeply. Yeah, whatever. Scarred, smart, whatever. Okay, then you're not, no. Then you're a liar. Then you have not acknowledged what you did was wrong. You did not change your behavior because you're still belittling what you've done. Recognize, man, come on. You have no right as the person who caused the harm to tell me what the harm was. No, as the victim, we who are victims deserve the right to say, no, this is how you hurt me. And you have to recognize that. That's what you have to acknowledge, not your narrative of it, the reality of it. And when they do that, then if it's genuine, you got to take it what they say. And then they have to also now sacrifice to make it right. What sacrifice? The deeper the scar, the more the sacrifice is going to hurt them, which is why a lot of folks don't go that way. They want to recognize it their way, not your way. And then when they even do go to that point, they're not going to sacrifice to make it right because it hurts them too much to do that, from whether it's emotional, mental, personal, physical, whatever. They're like, I'm not doing it, and they walk away. The people that usually wrong you, it's a lot of them too to do this. Both people have a lot to do. It's a lot. It's a really healing process, though. Yes.
Pam said, how do you distinguish between restitution and a bribe?
It's the condition. It's a good point. It's the condition of the person's heart, the recognition issue, the recognition of the agathos disposition. When Jesus said, why do you call me good? There's none good but God. Let's look to your point now about Zacchaeus. This is how you know. This is how you know. Let's go to Luke in chapter 19 for a moment. Since we're on this subject matter, it's a great question. Great question. How do you recognize the difference between restitution and a bribe? What an excellent question. Because oftentimes, people do just that. Understand, Leviticus 6 was what Zacchaeus did more than what he was required to do. Watch this. Leviticus 6 was now exemplified in Luke 19. Luke 19, verses 8 and 9. But Zacchaeus, standing up, said to the Lord, this is Luke 19, verse 8. Zacchaeus, standing up, said to the Lord, behold, Master, the half of my possessions, 20%, 50%. How do you tell between restitution and a bribe? Because one who is truly acknowledging and changing their behavior will do whatever it takes. There is no end. They'll take the rules as just a reference point, and they will exaggerate beyond that to do what it takes to make right. The deeper the gravity of the sin, the more they'll go off the chart on trying to make it right. Zacchaeus has been stealing for a long time. So he says, I'm going to get back 20%. Oh, heck no. How about half? Wow. Dude, that's like more than double what is required. 20% is required. He said 50. And then he says, and he says, and if I've extorted anything from anyone, I'll restore fourfold. He put a fine on himself. The fine that they said was, the fine was that you give back what you stole plus a fine plus 20%. Zacchaeus imposes upon himself. Jesus didn't say anything about this. Zacchaeus, on his own, said, I know the rules, but I've been so moved right now from God's love in my life. How could I ever outdo God's love? He loved me in ways I could never even deserve or imagine. I'm going to do likewise to those that I've wronged. I'm going to love them in ways that go beyond what the law requires. Why wouldn't I? Why shouldn't I? And that's the difference between a bribe and restitution. A bribe has limits and a predetermined amount. Restitution knows no limits. Restitution knows no bounds. It's heartfelt. It's limitless. It's sacrificial. It hurts to give it, but the desire to do so is overwhelming. You can't help yourself but to want to do what is right, to make right by what you've done wrong. As Zacchaeus said, fourfold. Remember, you take a pan sheep, you give back 4 sheep. I like how he says fourfold, not fivefold. That would have spoke to the oxen. But he spoke to the sheep because, in other words, what he's saying is sheep are easier to steal. He took advantage of people that were easy to take advantage of. You talked about earlier today. He took advantage of people easily that were easy prey. Sheep are easy to steal. He took advantage of the most uneducated people, of the most susceptible people. And so Zacchaeus knew that. That's why he said fourfold. He knew dang gone well what he was doing. He took advantage of the people that weren't as educated as him, that weren't as intuitive as him, how they could collect tax. They didn't know how to check if he was telling the truth or not. You see what I'm saying?
Exactly
Isn't that crazy?
going through.
And then verse 9, he said, and Jesus said to him, today hath salvation come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost, verse 10. And we know the lost is not those on their way to a fiery pit. It's those that know who God is, who were walking of covenant, but were getting off the path of following the laws that were set before them, like Zacchaeus, a person of covenant who had gone off the path. And God said, hey, come down from there. For I'm going to your house today. For I'm going to your house today. Because that wee little man, that wee little man. I love it how they call Zacchaeus a little guy. People make fun of short people today. But how amazing is it that God used a person of short stature to show a person of huge spiritual stature as the example for what restitution, reconciliation looks like. To give above and beyond what you're even asked to do or think. Not because it's a set number, because you can't help yourself. You desire to do it. You want to do it. You're limitless in what you want to give. You go beyond what the law says. More than 2 times what the law required for him to do. He wasn't even asked by Jesus. He just knew. You just know. You know. A bribe requires interaction. Well, I have this much money. Will you take it? That's not what restitution is. Restitution is, I'm giving this to you because I have to. Because I want to. With nothing in return. A bribe wants something else in return. Restitution, nothing in return. I give it because I'm required to. It never said, and Zacchaeus was looking for them to forgive him, not his right. He has no right to demand forgiveness. No, you give restitution because you're obligated to. If they forgive you, they do. If they don't, they don't. That's on them. Your job, pay back what you took to the level of what God told you. And he gave back more than twice. Restitution, limitless, boundless. It's innate. You can't help but to want to do it. And it has nothing in return that it seeks. Zero. Except for to please God. That's it. That's all you're doing it for. Please God and to make right by somebody else. Not to gain something out of it monetarily or temporarily. Spiritual gain only by pleasing God, making peace with your brother. Yes?
Todd said, what is the salvation in verse 9?
The salvation in verse 9 we talked about of covenant people. He was the lost being saved. He's the salvation number 2. He went from salvation of covenant to salvation in testament. Salvation 1, salvation 2. That's where he went. Great question. Because remember, God seeking and saving that which was lost, whenever that is brought up about people of covenant that have lost their way and not following the law, like Zacchaeus. He was of covenant already in that first salvation, but he wasn't under the blood. He wasn't in testament, which is the one salvation that really matters. It's the salvation that's the earmark of what is really matter. We call that being saved in our common Christianity circles, right? So being in testament is what happened here. Christ took Zacchaeus being of covenant to now being in testament. Yes?
And he said, what is the Greek word?
For salvation? Soteria? Is that what you're asking me? I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Salvation.
Yeah, soteria. It's salvation. It's soteriology, soteria. But that word in verse 10, soteria, and salvation. So
Might have been like a down payment on salvation number 2 because the resurrection hadn't yet happened.
to your point, yeah. So to your point, yes. So it wasn't salvation number 2 experienced right away. It was a down payment, correct, because his blood hadn't been shed yet. But he was pretty much given the check to cash once he had the money in the bank of his blood, of the currency for salvation. Yes. So just like people in the Old Testament, he was credited with I should say it that way. He was credited like Abraham was credited with righteousness. Isaac was credited as being killed. He was credited with that. He was given that promise to be in testament once he had shed his blood and applied the mercy seat. Then yes, but not right away. To your point, yes.
Yeah, I was thinking about something else about Rachel. Yeah, she did something with the household God stole from her father, and so not exactly the law of the harvest. You reap what you sow, but maybe some of her complication with childbirth related back to that.
Yeah, her own sins came to roost. Yeah, I could see. Yep, because of her idolatry issue, stealing the idols. Yeah, it's true. I know. Some of it comes back to haunt you. Your sins do find you out. God told Cain that. Yeah. Yes.
First of all, Pam said singular in verse 9 and plural in verse 10.
Oh.
Vicky said, why do you say that Zacchaeus is a thief here? Because he offers up restitution?
I got you. Now I understand what you're saying now. Okay, so yeah, okay. Two things are being brought up now. So first of all, thank you for bringing up the salvation that has been, the reason he said that he is being, to your point, for the Son of Man, the first day, when the first verse 9, salvation, to your point, I'm sorry, now I understand the question exactly. Verse 9 is singular, that's referring to being in the Testament. And then in verse 10, where he says, for the Son of Man has come to seek and save that which was lost, the word is plural, showing you that the God's intent to bring someone from covenant to testament was not to stop there. The intent was to have ongoing salvations in Christ. Thank you for that exactness of what you were asking. Sorry about that I missed it. So to answer that first question, to Todd's point, Pam's point, salvation in verse 9 refers to being of covenant to then being vicariously credited with being in testament once Christ would then die on the cross, rise from the dead, put the blood in the mercy seat. Well, then you're in testament after that. You've been given that promise ahead of time. And then in verse 10, he's referring to the multiple salvations. That was the intention. He had no intention, ever, of just bringing somebody from covenant to testament and stopping there. That was never his intention. His intention was to seek that which was lost, to ongoingly bring them salvations. He wants the best for Israel. Remember, he wanted them to be mature. Remember? So he wants them to go through multiple salvations, to your point. So that's all of them, leading up to ultimately what he wants for them to be the best, but they're not going to experience all of them, obviously, we know, but doesn't mean it wasn't his intent. Just like he wanted to gather them as a mother hen does her chicks. So I hope that answers that question. The other question is about why do I think Zacchaeus was a thief? Because he was a tax collector and he took back. And he even says in verse 8, he says, I will behold my possessions, I will give back. I'll give to the poor. And if I have extorted, he uses the word extorted. He did that. He's circumventing himself. He's looking at himself circumspectly. He's calling himself out. And again, not only is he saying it, but he's also doing things that are commensurate with a thief. Thieves give back more than what they took. That's what he's doing. Yes?
And Lainey said, was he collecting too many taxes?
Yes. He was overtaxing people. That's the whole point. He was taking advantage of people, charging them more than he was supposed to, or needed to, or was allowed to. He kept doing it, and he was pocketing the money. He wasn't giving it to the Romans. You see what I'm saying? He was taking cream off the top. Okay. He was taking gravy off the top. He was overtaxing to line his own pockets. People do this still today. They do this. People all the time do this. How much is the car? $12,000. MSRP. We'll sell it to you for 10. When the manager said earlier today, all those cars of those makes and models go for 9. Then why did you charge me 10? Made it sound like it was a discount from 12 to 10 because they put a narrative out there to make it sound like you had a deal when they just pocketed $1,000. That's what Zacchaeus was doing. He was trumping up the charges to pocket the difference of overcharging people. He was lying. He was deceiving, manipulating the situation for his own benefit. And that's why he says the word extorted. He's not, he calls himself out. So going back to Leviticus chapter 6, in verse 6, last verse. When for this trespass he shall bring for a ram, for the Lord a ram from the flock without blemish, thou must fine him to the amount of his trespass. Yes?
And Pam said, yep, done every day.
Yeah, every day I do that, right? And by the way, notice how God says, not only in verse 5 of Leviticus 6, as soon as you're made aware that you've done wrong by somebody, if you stole someone's, like my siblings talking about how our parents took from us the ability to know what love was. They stole from us our innocence. They stole from them. If someone took from you something mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, monetary, the moment that person who's wronged you has been made aware of their wrong, they are under charge from God immediately to make right. Not next day, not next week, not next month, not in 2 years. Well, when I have a better situation, I'll make right. No. As soon as God tells you, the intent is right away. He told you for a reason. He told you for a reason. Act on it now. Act on it now. Now. You go, well, no, my check's coming in from this big sale. I don't want to hear it. Make right now. Today is the day. If God convicts you to make right by somebody you've wronged, you better not delay. Don't dilly-dally around. You say it's not a monetary thing, by the way. It's a spiritual thing. You have no, the reason why God would do that, because you don't know what he's already been doing in the victim's heart. If the victim person has been in their place of their heart, whether God's softened them up, God got them in a place of peace, and now he's wanting you to now act. And you go, well, oh, wait, moron. You know what right is, do it. That's what moron means, right? You know what right is, and you don't do it, that's being a moron. Do not do that. God says, you know what right is, go do it. But I can't afford to. I don't feel like it right now. All these excuses. God says, you have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. You have no idea the collateral damage that you've done. You have no idea the collateral damage that's been happening in this person's mind, soul, heart, and spirit. And I got them at a place right now where I have softened them up to hear these words, to hear this moment, and you refuse to act. You think that that's not going to not sit well with me? God's going to have you up. He's going to really get. That's not funny. Do it immediately. When you stole from somebody, you have to do it immediately. Give back. As soon as you're made aware that you've been wrong, that you wronged somebody, that you stole from them, you better give it back immediately. Not, again, no delay, no justification, no narratives. Right away, just do it. The person who receives that will love you for that. Because think about it. If they say, how long have you felt that way? And you say, just this morning, just yesterday. How much more does that resonate with the victim? Going, wow, you acted right away. You see, it's not just for you, it's for the person receiving the love. How much does that mean to you and me? If our person who wronged us said that, how much this would mean so much? Because you're like, wow, they really get it. They get the gravity of how much this means to me. They acted right away. But versus them saying, oh, I've known this for a couple months now. Why did you wait that long? I've waited years to hear you say this. Why didn't you just, you see, those thoughts come to your head. You see, God's not stupid. That's why he says, as soon as someone stole from you, you make it right away. As soon as you're made aware. Yes.
And Lainey said, no matter what their maturity level is, spiritual that is.
Yeah. No matter what it is. And by the way, too, then what does God say to do? He goes off and he ends with verse 6 by saying, this is a trespass against this person that requires you to bring one of your ram from your flock to the Lord without blemish. This means you're not just bringing, you're bringing your best. You're bringing your best to God to make up for what you've done wrong. Isn't that interesting? You don't just come half-heartedly. You don't come at that. You come at this like you're good. You come at this like you just won an Oscar. You just won a Nobel Peace Prize. You come at this like all eyes are on you. You're in the Supreme Courtroom being summoned to testify. You're coming at this with the utmost respect, and you're giving your best to make this right. You don't come half-hearted. No, you do everything at the top level. You make right by the person you made a victim. If you're the person who's done the wrong, not only do you do it immediately when you're made aware that you did the wrong, but you come with your best efforts, your best foot forward, your best genuine of everything. You just don't come half-cocked. You come fully loaded with full strength of God's strength and spirit, full soul conviction of contriteness, your full body language of, I'm genuine, I'm sincere, I want to do whatever it takes to repay. You come 100%, not 98, 99, 100%. And by the way, another big, huge difference between restitution and bribery. Big difference, right? Their attitude of their heart, their disposition, you can tell that kind of person is coming with 100% effort to make it right. Because you know why? They have no limits. They have no bounds. They just can't help themselves to give their best. And they want nothing in return. They just want to do what's right. And the best way they know how, with all they can, with all God has given them. They want to put the full weight of God's conviction on their heart of doing what's righteous in and towards you. They want that full weight of God's love behind them to exhibit that to you. To show restitution in the best way they possibly can, which is only done through God's will and strength in their life. Leviticus 16. Leviticus 16. Oh, not 16, excuse me. 24. I said 16. I don't know why I'm saying that. Leviticus 24. Leviticus 24 from verses 17 to 21. And whosoever smites another so that he die, let him be put to death. Whosoever may smite a beast that he so would die, let him be compensation, beast for beast. Whoever shall cause a blemish to his neighbor, who has done to him, so it shall be done to himself. You see where the golden rule concept comes from? Right here. The golden rule, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. That comes from Leviticus 24, verse 19. When he said, it's the concept of what they're trying to get out, which is God's basically saying, as he hath done to him, so shall it be done to himself. They get the golden rule from what God's talking about is restitution and consequences. And we have mistaken this to be judgment, vengeance. No. No. God never instituted some level of being judgmental toward people or having vengeance or being a vigilante. That is never, ever. I can't, people say, you wronged my kid, I'll hunt you down and I'll kill you. Okay, that's nice. That sounds all tough. That's completely wrong. You can't do that. We're just like, okay, fine. Have your justice. And then face your angry, wrathful God as he breaks it off in your hind parts. And you will never be an heir. That's a rebellion 101. Well, they took my kid. Listen, God's vengeance is his alone. It's not mine. It's not yours. They can't take those you love and then you justify it because it's someone you love to then do your actions. It doesn't work that way. I understand that it's ridiculously, unbelievably harmful when that happens. It's not easy. But the action of taking it into your own hands is always wrong. Always wrong. Always wrong. That's why God says, as it is done to him, so it shall be done to himself. In verse 20, bruise for bruise, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. According to the blemish he hath given the man, so shall it be returned to him. So people say eye for an eye means, you see, you get me, I get you. That's not what he means, doofus. What he means is, if you stole my car and then sold it, I get your car. Dude, it doesn't mean you stole my car, I'm gonna punch you. That's not what he's talking about. Are you stupid? Really? That's not what he's saying. An eye for an eye. You took you killed my loved one, I'm gonna go kill your loved one. No! What he's saying is, you took the life of that which I love. Obviously, you love your life more than anybody else's. You don't get incarcerated until you get to death row. I don't do that. The law of the land does that. You forfeit your life. You cause someone else's life to forfeit, your life is forfeit. That's what he means. You stole 10 grand from the bank because you robbed it. Guess what? You owe 10 grand back to the bank because you robbed it. You sexually molested this girl. Well, guess what? If it was me, I'd have laws of castration myself. Personally, if a person raped somebody, I would have castration all day long. Because then Mikey would tell Tommy to tell Timmy, haha, yeah, I ain't doing that. Yeah, you think? Because now the crime fits the punishment. That's what God's talking about. What you do, you get back in return for what you did. Guess what? You ain't doing that again because you can't. So now all of a sudden, oh, well, they're going to think twice about having that action done, aren't they? Yeah, they sure enough are. Because Timmy and Tommy and Johnny got around town going, yeah, I'm all eunuch now. So, yeah, I'm more than just eunuch. I'm all gone down there. So I'm like Ken doll now. Yeah. So now they got to know they're not going to do that, are they? Yeah. Like ever again. How much would that, like in the old Middle Eastern days, they steal, they chop off your right hand. Which now you have to wipe your backside with your other hand, which you're supposed to shake with your right and wipe with your left. And now they know, ugh, you're a thief. And now you have to shake your hand with the one hand you have to wipe your backside with. Ugh. They don't, that's what they do back in those over there. So God's talking about how the compensation, the restitution, the consequence, not vengeance, not judgment. We took this eye for eye, tooth for tooth thing out of context and say, oh, God means kill him. No, God. The only time the kill him thing came into view was when he said, when a man takes a man's blood, his blood shall be shed to Noah. When it comes to murder, yes, that's true, but not you doing it. The law. That person has to be sought after, apprehended, brought to justice, and under the law, their life is forfeit. Whether that law determines they're in jail for all their life, or whether that law determines they're electrocuted or gas chambered or hanged back in the day or whatever it is, it's not for you to say. That's the law of the land. It's not for you to say. If you don't like the outcome, it's not for you to have, again, it's not for you to say. That's not, you don't get involved in this whole thing about, that's not fair. I understand things aren't fair. I understand that. Believe me, I get it. But you have no right to take the law in your own hands and do vengeful justice. There is no such thing as vengeful justice. That's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as vengeful justice. No, justice is doing that which is just. That means following God's laws. Since we're sinners, how can we possibly do what's just? We can't. We got to follow the rules. And if the rules say, let them be compensated what they get for what they get, God's put rules over us to let the governments he has over us deal with that. And then he also has things that if they're not to that level of crimes, so if they ran over my cat purposely and killed my cat, guess what? They better get a new cat from the store. They better go to the pet store and buy me a new cat. You slashed my tires because you were vengeful about me because of something I did or didn't do, or you thought I did or didn't do, but you owe me a new tire. It's that simple. You get to pay back the exact amount of what you took from me. That's all God's trying to say. You know, it's the old Gandhiism. If it was always eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, the world would be blind and wouldn't be able to eat anything because we'd all be with no teeth and no eyes. I mean, all of us have taken something from somebody at some degree. And all of us owe some restitution to somebody at some degree. He doesn't mean actually take your eyeball out of your eye. He means he's just trying to say what was taken, what should be given. You don't simply, for example, what he's bringing out is what was happening was people were actually wronging people to a deeper level and trying to give them a lighthearted response that was easy for them. You know, when they would actually say, you know, I'm sorry that my ox gored you and you lost your leg. How about I give you an ox? How about no? How about the ox that you give me is only going to be a temporal fix? This is a permanent reality for me. You need to give me a permanency of understanding that I can no longer, in those days, work for my living the same level I could have. You have literally cost me a quality of life. You've cost me an embarrassment of my society. You've cost me a loss of income. You must give me compensatory to that. An ox just doesn't cut it. Well, I'll kill mine and give it to you too. Again, doesn't cut it. You cannot take a permanent reality that you've given me now and give me a temporary fix and think that's compensatory. How is that compensatory? If I have a permanent consequence, so if that's someone that's permanently scarred you emotionally and mentally, guess what? Can they simply give you an ice cream cone and a nice hug and a kiss and it's all good? No. They must continuously, for the rest of their God-given life, until you have made peace with your own emotional and mental state, with what they have caused, they owe it to you. They go, I was asking too much. You should have thought about that, Dillweed, before you did all those evil things to that person. How is it their fault you were mommy dearest on them? How is it their fault you were all beaten up on them? That's not their fault. And if they were physically, emotionally, spiritually scarred, and you want to make right by that person, the person who's done the wrongdoer, owes, again, restitution, which has no limits, no bounds, is more than willing to do whatever it takes. So they should have no problem spending the rest of their life making peace with you. Is it asking too much? Is it though? Because what you're really doing is making peace with your God by making peace with this person who is the one you're supposed to be in charge to love. That's why God said, give me your ram without blemish. I want the best of you to make right. Not the least of you, not the throwaway, the best of you. So let's go now also to some other scriptures. I want to go to in 1 Samuel and not 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel chapter 12 and verse 5 and 6. I talked about it last week where Nathan approaches David, and David doesn't say 5 times or 4 times for the stolen oxen or sheep. He talks about this being 7 times. So we're going to look at this and 2 Samuel chapter 12 verses 5 and 6. And David was inflamed with indignation. Nathan telling him the story about what he had done about the shepherd who took the one man's sheep against the man to a great degree, and said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, the man who hath done this is guilty of death. 2 Samuel 12 verse 6. And he shall make 7-fold restitution for the lamb, because he hath done such a deed and has no compassion. You see, David's talking about the deed was done, but how it was done. The disposition of the person changes the restitution. So if someone was meaning to do malintent, if someone was predispositioned, predetermined, premeditated to do evil unto you, that person owes more restitution than just the average wrong. Do you see? There's a difference. If someone says, you don't understand, I was abused and that's why I abused you, or I was mentally scarred and that's why I mentally scarred you, or I was sexually abused and that's why I did that to you. And I can understand that. That's a different situation. But if someone says, I don't even care. I knew what I was doing, and I did it because I enjoyed it. Whoa. I did it because I wanted to do it. I didn't care. There's no justification. No, I own it. Whoa, that's a whole different level of vitriol. Now you're a total jerk. You're doing it because you're not only do you do the wrong, but you're embracing the wrong as if you're saying, you know what, I don't even care. You have no compassion. You have no remorse over your wrongs. If you have no remorse over your wrongs, no compassion what you did wrong, God says your restitution just got upped. Your restitution just went up a whole notch. Yes.
Like a difference between intrinsic and intentional evil.
Correct. Intrinsic evil versus intentional. Two different things. Yes.
Okay, first of all, Vicki said the death sentence is seen in verse 17. Mm-hmm. Christians today don't want the death penalty. That is that because Jesus has shown mercy by staying on the cross. Forgive them. How do we incorporate these Old Testament laws in light of Jesus' forgiveness over us? There seems to be a fracture in Christianity when today no one wants to follow Old Testament laws in this age.
Yeah,
Todd
no, so the whole thing.
Fourfold, he said in the New King James Version it says fourfold.
I know.
I see in the Septuagint it says sevenfold.
Yep, I mentioned that. Yep, I mentioned that last week. At the King James says fourfold, but in the actual Septuagint it says 7. And remember, when it comes to numbers, dates, I always take Septuagint over King James. Why? Because it uses older manuscripts. And the older manuscripts, regardless of being Hebrew to Greek to English, numbers are numbers. Those don't change. Names change. The wording changes. The words change. But the numbers can't change. Numbers are numbers. Numbers universal language. So numbers in context, I always side the Septuagint. Always, every day. All the time. Context and numbers, the Septuagint is always right. Always. Always take it over the King James all day long. Always. It's using older manuscripts, therefore it's always right. The context is always to be understood better in the Septuagint, and the numbers, always. Age of somebody, date of something, in this case, a number of something, always better in the Septuagint. Yes?
And Pam said, so then the Zacchaeus story, that has a fourfold relating to sheep, 7 and 4 both refer to sheep.
Yeah, so the fourfold refers to the sheep we talked about earlier in the Exodus passages of restitution. I'm going to get to the sevenfold in a minute. As I'm getting there, what you want to do is turn over to Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 30 and 31. And while we're turning there, I'm going to answer Vicky's question. What do we do with these people in Christianity today that want to always indiffer with us, saying, oh, the Old Testament teaches death penalty, but Jesus forgave him, was merciful even on the cross, so therefore that doesn't exist anymore. Well, the whole thing is, Jesus did not, he fulfilled the law. He didn't do away with it, remember? He fulfilled it. He fulfilled it in all ways, okay? So fulfilling the law does not mean he did away with it. He didn't abolish the law. He fulfilled it. The law has no more power over us. But in fulfilling it, he fulfilled every principle and intent of that law. Did Jesus himself practice the death penalty? You go, no, he didn't. After he rose from the dead, no, he didn't. Ananias and Sapphira, they dropped dead, didn't they? Who did that? God. Why? Did they kill somebody? No. Wow. They lied to God. They broke the commandment of how they should be living righteously because they were lying and being deceitful and being unjust. God determined that lying to him directly constituted death. Gosh, that's nowhere in the Old Testament. I mean, good gracious. But boom, God just kills them, drop dead Fred right there, Acts chapter 5. So the actual death penalty is still in place because the principle doesn't change. The human life still valued. Yes. Psalm 139, in the womb we're knitted together by God. Does all of a sudden change because now we're in the New Testament? Well, we're not knitted together anymore. Jesus didn't say so. Does he really have to? Really? Does he have to relive every single thing he already said? Under what rules do we have the right to tell God, unless you repeat it, I'm not going to believe it? Whoops, that was my brace. Unless you repeat it, I'm not going to believe it. That's just a dumb thing, you know? We always say, you got to repeat yourself, I'm not going to believe it. He's going, excuse me? You're the creation. Tone it down a notch. The principles are the principles are the principles. I told you in Hebrews, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. The principles never change. They never change. They never change. The methods always change. Always. Principles never change. How I apply those principles always changes. Because he's training us, he's teaching us, he's growing us. The principle, life is valuable. The principle, he made that life. The principle, if you end up on your own taking a life, out of your own vengeance, out of your own self-anger and sin, you answer for that, life for life, period. It's that simple. And there's rules of how you do that. Involuntarily versus voluntarily. He talks about that later on in other passages about murder itself. And manslaughter, we get those terms today. Yes, sorry.
Proverbs 6, the 7 things the Lord hates. Lying is twice. The lying tongue is there, and then the false witness that speaketh lies.
Yeah, lying.
Twice,
It's
and
yeah.
then the 7 things the Lord hates.
Yeah, lying and then testifying of a lie. Yeah, it's two different things. Yeah, yeah. He doesn't like lying at all. It does it twice. That's a good point. Yes.
And Pam said yes.
Yeah, principle. So the principle of a life for a life, the value of life, doesn't change anything. I mean, show me one principle of God in the Old Testament that's no longer true in the New Testament. Give me one example. Just one. There's none. The principles are all the same. Do we have to honor